So, my brother and I, we kind of grew up on Pokemon. Around here, a lot of kids did. It worked out perfectly for us, too. Every time a new gen came out, one of us would get one version, one of us would get the other. And since our mom liked to spoil us, we both got the third one. This is gonna this is going to sound at first like a bittersweet story about two siblings who grew up with a couple games that eventually take them down to two different roads. Well, it's a little more than that. The years rolled by. We kept collecting Game Boys. We got old. We replaced them. Cartridges finally gave out. We picked up new copies. But we started down to completely different roads before Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald came out. See, around then, my brother got a Game Shark. We heard about the hacks and cheats you could do with them, even if we were kind of late to the party, and they sounded awfully cool. Our first guinea pig cartridge was my brother's old blue version. We just dicked around with it a bit, nothing major, but whatever we did fucked up the cartridge. After just a couple of code entries, it glitched out completely and became unplayable. Naturally, we were upset at first. My brother moaned and lost of his hours of work. I was sympathetic. I told him, it's okay, we can replace it, I guess. Stupid shark was a waste of money. But here our paths finally differed. After seeing the mess it had turned blue version into, I had become obsessed with the idea of hacking or cheating any of my games. What can I say? I'm a chick. I feel feelings for the little pixel critters. At least with that Game Shark. But my brother had taken his game's destruction as a personal challenge or something. I don't think he ever played a game after that which wasn't hacked somehow. Yeah, we played a shit ton of Pokemon, man. But for us, there really wasn't much else to do. We live way out of the country without many other kids, and farmers didn't want us on their property, so we played Pokemon out on the lawn about all day, every day. It was pretty awesome to us, at least. We lost a Game Shark when our room got moved around. A new addition was built onto our house, and it disappeared in the mess of shit that got stuff into the new closet. Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald arrived, and after playing through them once, we were both in agreement that they were definitely lacking in comparison to the last gen. We both tried other honest playthrough, and though we managed to finish, it left us both yearning for some good old-fashioned nostalgia. Where, where were our old gold, silver, and crystal cartridges, though? It took us probably a month to dig through the boxes. We'd been too lazy to open up before, but we finally found one full of shitload of our old electronics. My old purple Game Boy Color still worked. His red one could no longer hold batteries in place. Both Game Boys were fine though, along with our snake lights and link cables. That one with the nifty little connector in the middle, and I had always wrapped up so carefully to avoid fraying the wires and condemning it into the trash like our last one. We both grabbed up everything we could. It was nice to have Yellow, which had been my first and most cherished game of any Pokemon series, not just Pokemon, and Red and Gold back. We went through the motions of checking our old files, taking it all the old memories, and eventually we figured that Gen 1 stuff was just too nostalgic to get rid of. I started gold, he restarted silver. Immediately he snatched the Game Shark out of the box and slipped it into the back of his GBA. I just shook my head at him. I remember what I said to him. That thing will kill your game, you know. He never had liked me preaching to him about abusing pixels. I shut my mouth after that, but it had pushed him off from playing with me. I guess it was just one time too many or something. I ought to know to keep my thoughts to myself, really. It was a couple days later that it happened. I was on the porch. I was out on the porch, Game Boy in hand, just about to go into the Elite Four, and I realized I needed a little help. My team was ill-balanced thanks to my playthrough of Leisure, and at the time I was no great trainer that could pull off gimmick runs. I knew my brother had been 2 badges ahead of me when we last checked with one another, so I was hoping maybe he'd let me borrow a Pokemon or two just for the run-through. Now that the thing I have spent the last 24 hours at a friend's place, I had literally come home, dumping my bag in my room, and crept out in the sun with my GBA in play. I had no idea what he'd been up to. For all I know, he was done with the game and onto a new one, which I figured was all the better for me since he wouldn't need those Pokemon, and I stand a better chance of nicking a few. So I got up, went into the house, and when I was crossing the living room, I noticed all of his Pokemon games lying on the floor. Some of the cartridges had been mangled, like they'd been hacked at something sharp. Even his old blue version long ago dead, too sentimental to throw away. And lying with a plastic cut rag split almost halfway up one side, completely unusable anymore, even it would have worked. I was a little scared. This had to have happened this morning. Otherwise, our mom would have seen that they wouldn't be lying on the carpet. Tucking my Game Boy in my pocket, I crept over to his room and found the door unlocked. Somehow, that was even more concerning. I walked in and found my brother sitting on the edge of his bed, with his GBA was in pieces on the floor at his feet, smashed to bits. Next to him was a bed. Next to him on the bed were a hammer and our mom's gardening scissors. His face was flatter than I'd ever seen it, even whiter than the time we've gone corning and then the old guy up in the street, legally blind and a raving nutcase, and come and chased us into the trees with a shotgun. It was now I noticed that the Game Shark on the ground and the silver cartridge corner poking from under his bed. Somehow they'd been separated in the raft of the hammer. "Are you okay?" I asked, remembering the chills that ran through me. He was my little brother. Seeing him like this was horrifying. It was awful. I remember him rasping, and the way his voice rattled made my knees weak. Oh God, white everywhere, and then black. I remember running over and hugged him, and I remember his limp arm fell and brushed the Game Boy in my pocket, and his suddenly scream right in my ear, making him jump and bite my tongue by accident. He ripped the handheld from my pocket and hurled it at the far wall. I cried out, and the dent of the plastic system made there. Running over to collect it, the screen had gone dark, and though I feared the worst, when I flicked the switch, it powered up normally. I waited there in the corner, terrified to pretend that my GBA mattered, enough not to go run for Mom. The volume was on. The Pokemon theme started up, and he screamed again, picking up the hammer. This time I screamed too. I ran from the room with my GBA clutched in my chest like a shield. He ended up in the psych ward of the hospital for 2 days. We went When we went to visit him, I left my GBA at home. No one could figure out what had set off his strange maniac behavior. There was some talk that I didn't understand at the time about some kind of disorder he may or may not have had. But even though Mom and I had collected and brought in all cut up cartridges to be looked at, Mom's idea, not mine. No one had even thought to tie it back to the game. Maybe that was my fault. I hadn't said a word what had happened when he had accidentally touched my Game Boy, or the blind white terror he had been thrown into when the music had started. On my last visit to the hospital before school on the second day, I was left alone in the room with him while Mom had some private talk with the doctor about their precautions to take should this happen again. I sat in the chair next to the bed. He was staring at the ceiling, but then suddenly he sat up, making me flinch. "Hey," he told me, "Angie, go in my room when you get home." I didn't understand what he meant, and then I remembered the things we hadn't packed up and brought in. The game and the hacking tool under his bed. Get rid of them. I don't ever want to play with them ever again. His voice was weary and desperate. He sounded like an old man on his deathbed. My poor damaged little brother. How could I refuse? Promise you'll get rid of them? Okay, I promise. I was carted off to school late. Through the whole day, I only had my promise to him in my head. I didn't know it at the time, but this would be the last time I could ever play the big sister role and help him out. I just had to get home and get rid of the game, but as the day went on, a sick curiosity started to go through my own head. What could possibly have happened to that game that scared him so badly? I was scared myself, but I just had to know. I had to. I got home and went right into his room, bent on uncovering whatever horror was waiting for me. Mom had since vacuumed the room. The cartridge and Game Shark were no longer visible. I got down and crawled half under the bed, feeling timid but holding on to the promise I made as a badge of courage. Under the bed there was enough dust to make me cough, enough old Legos and various other toys I couldn't set my elbow down without landing on something, but I finally saw both objects. They'd been shoved to the corner on top of a notebook that looked too new to have been down here long. Unthinking, I grabbed the corner of the paper, dragging everything out with me, still wheezing from the dust. It looked so innocent, simple toys in a simple spiral bound of bunch of papers. When I set Silver version and the Game Shark on the floor, I took a closer look at the notebook. On it were scrawls, at least 20 different cheat codes, but one has been scratched out with a Sharpie over where it had initially been drawn in with the pen. This was confusing. He had really tried to erase it out. The marker had been pressed on the paper so hard that the ink soaked through most of the pages. And behind it, most 2/3 of the way of the cardstock back cover, but pen has a way of sticking around. I picked up the notebook and tilted it backwards in the light, and the reflective surface of the Sharpie revealed the indents that had been left where he'd written. The Chico was unintelligible mess of letters and numbers, but the words next to it confused me. Easter egg. Snow on Mount Silver. I remembered what he had been saying when I found him. He was been raving about white, and then black. Could he meant snow? Even though it was only August and the temperature was still climbing to 90 degrees every day, a chill ran down my spine. Did I dare? I picked up everything and brought it to my room and laid it out on the carpet in front of me with my own GBA next to it. For a long time I just stared down at it, and the longer I looked, the more manically Lugia's face became on the sticker, like some kind of twisted grin. Like it was daring me to find out what happened to my brother. I was a 14-year-old kid. Did I really want to tempt fate and risk ending up like him? I glared down at Lugia for a while longer. I had to see. I slid gold out of my GBA and stuck silver into its place. It almost took me 15 minutes to compose myself and turn it on. I started up normal. I left the sound on low, too afraid of what I might hear to keep it up the full way, and curious to turn it the whole way off. The screen was normal too. Lugia again, but somehow menacingly, despite my common sense telling me it was exactly the same picture as every other time I was staring up the game. How bad could this be? I didn't ask myself. His note said Easter egg. Didn't that mean that was coding already in the game? The menu came up, still absolutely normal. His character was Blake, mostly filled Pokedex, but the time was odd. 999 hours and 99 minutes. I knew he couldn't have been playing that long. I had barely logged 50 hours on my own game, and I was at the E4, and I was playing slowly. Perhaps the result of his hacking fucked up his file. And I thought, well, whatever then. The game started up, and the first thing I noticed was a prolonged black screen. It took almost a minute for anything to change, and there was no sound at all. The hairs on my back of my neck were standing up already, but it was too late to turn back. Finally, a dim sort of map came into the screen. It looked like static. What was going on? I squinted down and realized with a fearsome pang that it was actually the Mount Silver map. But I thought was static was heavy falling snow. So this was where he had last saved his game. I checked his party, a very normal team for someone who's been using a Game Shark. Typhlosion, Regogator, Meganium, Pidgeot, Tyranitar, and Lugia, all at 100, and modded moves, typical for him. Something about the sprites was strange though. They seemed solid in a way. Their colors seemed washed out, and their expressions lacked the usual vigor and they normally had. I chalked this up to missing pixels or something, also due to the hacking. The map had brightened up just a smidgen when I closed out of the start menu. Indeed, snow was somehow falling very heavily. Pixels danced across the screen so fast it was hard to see the little sprite that was my brother's character. Something was off about him, too. When I checked this information, it was the same as the Pokemon sprites. The colors were dull. In fact, now I thought about it, he almost looked frostbitten. My stomach tightened, and I turned and tried to move back down the mountain. And as I hit the bottom of the screen, words popped out, and there was finally a sound. My sprite hitting an invisible wall. I can't turn back now. That was unsettling. I went onto my Pokemon and tried to use Pidgeot's fly ability. I can't fly in this. Obviously referring to the snow. Fuck this, I thought. Going into his bag, there was an escape rope. I tried using it. I can't go back anymore. What was going on? Once again, I tried to walk back down the mountain, and to my horror, the words changed with every attempt. I can't run away. I can't go back down. I can never go back. This last one sent a frigid feeling through my heart. There was no way down the mountain. I had to climb it. Turning the little sprite around, I moved him forward. No resistance at all, though my walking speed was oddly slow. What was truly weird was the lack of grass, of trainers of anything anything at all but the white snow, which still blew across the screen and made it almost impossible to see. As I moved further up the mountain, his walking speed became slower and slower. The static curtain of pixels grew thicker, so that I can barely make out the features of the map, but it seemed like the only way to move was straight ahead anyway. I reached what looked like a set of stairs in the very top of the edge of the screen. I didn't remember this being there before. As I tried to move up, the little sprite paused. I'm cold. But now, I was getting goosebumps. His walking speed had become painfully slow, and as if something he had being impended up the little staircase. More text of the screen. Meganium has died. What the fuck? I thought. Pokemon don't die in these games. I checked my party and I was frightened and confused by what I saw. Meganium's sprite was been replaced by a red X. All my other Pokemon spotted varying degrees of damage, though I had battled once. I went into a bag and found a single revive and I tried using it. It's too late, it said. What kind of Easter egg was this? There was much else I could do, trying to turn around, yelling in the same message as before, so I kept moving. Pidgeot has died. I checked again. Sure enough, there was a little red X. This time, I selecting it and looked at the Pokemon itself, trying to figure out what was wrong. I wished I hadn't. The sprite was mangled, pieces of it missing. What was left of its splotch with sickish blue-gray colors, and its eye was solid black pit. I flipped down to Meganium, same deal. A leg missing, a chunk of its neck, and most of its head. Save that pitch-black dead eye. Morbid curiosity urged me onward, and the path never deviated from the straight upward road I've traveled the entire time. Along the way, every now and then another party Pokemon would die. An examination of its sprite which showed it was in the same condition as the others, until all that was left was Typhlosion. One more staircase was up ahead. I climbed it, braced for whatever horror awaits me. I hit the summit. It was deserted. Red was nowhere to be found. Snow had stopped falling. In the very center of the map, something sticking out of the snow. It looked like a Pokeball. Okay, maybe all this creepy shit led up to some climactic final battle, using whatever was in there. If I picked it up, maybe Red would come out of hiding. I walked over and examined it, and there was a burst of static noises from my game that made me jump. What appeared on my screen was a battle animation. My trainer sprite appearing, his skin tinged blue, against another mangled Pokemon sprite was Celebi. In the center of the black eye was its in the center of the black hole that was its eye. A single red dot burned out like an ember. The thing looked rotten. I didn't even throw out mostly dead Typhlosion before it had moved. Selby used Pear's song. A screech came out of my GBA, and I almost dropped as the screen went white. A part of me was relieved, thinking that my final Pokemon had been KO'd and would be transported to the Pokemon Center. But I was wrong. My sprite reappeared in what looked like a cave. Was I now inside the mountain? I checked my trainer card and felt sick. The sprite was just as small as the Pokemon had been, leg gone, a single eye remaining, a pitch black, and so sad looking. Tears welled up at the corner, and every color on him was replaced by those sick shady of frosty blue and gray. Every stat on the card was reduced to 0 except the time, which still read 99999 minutes. I quickly moved back to the map. His sprite there mimicked the horror it had become on the trainer card. Pieces of it missing. Everything was discolored. I started typing. I started trying to walk, and at first I received a message. It was cold. There was only one direction to go, upward. I move on, and every now and then would stop by a message that made my heart sink lower and lower. Mother, it feels so cold. I can't go on. The walls, as I walked, become darker and darker until they were pitch black at the end. There was an exit there, marked only by a white outline. I had no other choice but to go through it. There was it opened to a chamber that was also solid white. The only way to distinguish the walls was a thin gray line. It marked them as separate from the wall of the floor. Again, the far wall, there was another sprite. Red sprite. Intact. I had to come this far. I had to finish this. I walked right up to him and hit A. A battle started. Red sprite had none of the deformalities that married my own. The colors were the same blues and grays, and he was intact. He just looked extremely sad. His first Pokemon came out, Venusaur, it was just like my own had been, but level 0, with a speck of health. A Sinnoh-type Typhlosion who had 6 hit points left. No Pokemon made a sound when they were brought into battle. Venusaur struggled. There was no animation, but a single point of damage done to my Typhlosion. Then the opposing sprite dropped off the screen. Venusaur has died. There was no text asking me to switch out. Instead, there was just what I took to be dialogue from Red. His next Pokemon was Blastoise. Even more mangled than Venusaur has been. It too struggled and died. After each round, there was an ominous from their trainer. Every sprite that was more damaged than the last one, his Espeon, was barely distinguished as a Pokemon. I realized somewhere he had been sending them out of order and saved one Pokemon for last. Pikachu came out, and it looked Grosstoic. It too was discolored like its frostbite. It was missing an ear, half its body and tail. Its head was mostly intact, but its eyes were much larger than they should have been. It glared out at me like pitch black windows into hell. But the thing that got me the most was the giant smile that extended almost all the way to the edges of its head. Its health was somehow at 0, or at least looked that way. My hands were shaking. I didn't get a chance to attack. Pikachu's pain split. Pikachu has died. Typhlosion has died. It cut out an image of Red Sprite, and it looked like mine, but its body was butchered. It so looked like a carcass stripped of most of its meat, except it had those same soulless, deranged eyes as Pikachu. I finally understood what happened. They were dead. They were dead. And this sub-level mountain was the hell they now exist in. Red finally spoke. It was over. The screen flashed back and white for a moment. Used Destiny Bond. A horrible, hideous screeching started to issue from my Game Boy. The screen went right and it shrieked at me. I threw it to the floor and pressed my back against the bed. The horrible noises continued for several long moments, and when the screen stayed white, then went black, there was a silence. It took me a few moments, but I eventually stood up. I took the Game Shark, I took the notebook, I took the fucking possessed game. I put them all up and carried them to the garbage can we had already set out for the morning pickup. At the end of our long, winding driveway, and I threw him in. I got back to the house. I didn't know what made me do it, but I picked up a yellow version and started into my Game Boy. I think it was a part of determined to make sure that I hadn't somehow been tainted as well. The music started up. The game played. I turned to my Pikachu and hit A. Smiling face greeted me with an ear twitch and a big, perplexed smile. A pleasant, normal smile. I turned my game off and spent the next hour crying on the floor. My brother and I never did play Pokemon together again. He gave it up for good. I stuck to playing my comforting, unhacked games. That winter, the snow fell.